Oh my God. And just like that, episode 9, I'm almost done with this shit. Oh, it's not that I don't like the show. It's that hang on, my hair is doing a thing. Okay, I loved last week's episode 8. I found it hard to even critique a lot of it because for the most part, it was pretty wild. And then they fucked us. Like, the writers fucked us, or we fucked ourselves by refusing to believe who the writers are, because they have shown us who they are time and time again, especially if you listen to the Writers Room podcast, where literally the writers of And Just Like That tell us their thoughts behind what they were doing in certain episodes, what they're doing with certain characters. And y'all, all the stuff that we talk about here that I read on other people's threads or just discussions I have with people in real life, all of us are on the same page with differing opinions, but it's all the same page. The writers are on another planet. And so for what they think they're doing, I guess they're right because it's their show. But we're all like, what? I mean, so they set it up as last episode ended with Miranda leaving her husband and getting on the phone and calling Carrie from the back of the cab and saying, I'm going to Cleveland to see Che, to surprise Che, who had just said to Miranda, I'm not traditional, AKA monogamous. I mean, that's not the exact words they use, but they use the words, I'm not traditional. And we infer the monogamy thing because Che would have been fine with Miranda being in an open marriage. We've heard time and time again that Che has multiple partners. They hook up a lot. So we were all led to believe, oh my God, Miranda's in for a rude awakening in Cleveland. Because they're setting it up that like Che is not on the same page as Miranda in terms of, the word isn't fidelity, but like traditional versus not. And honestly, if Miranda didn't find a rude awakening in Cleveland in the form of Che just being too busy to spend time with Miranda because they're around adoring fans, or to the extreme of like, oh, I already have a side piece in Cleveland, or I'm hooking up after the show or whatever, Miranda's getting off so easy. I mean, she just ended her marriage and relationship of that spans 2 decades and just dropped in Steve's lap. I met somebody and he's like, well, I'm not going to fight you on this. You do your thing. But I'm not saying she needs to be punished. Like we're going to stone her in the town square. Again, things I'm on board with. Getting bored in your marriage. Realizing you're not totally just straight. Wanting to end a marriage and just there's no graceful way to do it sometimes. Even cheating. All of that I'm fine with. But it would be interesting to have had a conversation where Steve says to Miranda, hey, when I cheated on you that one time because you weren't having sex with me, I told you about it because I wanted to work through it. So I'm not throwing it back in your face, because everyone says that on the internet. She freaked out when he cheated on her. It's like, to me, that's not an argument. If I'm a lawyer in court, it doesn't get me anywhere. Yes. 15 years ago, she had a reaction about something, and she evolved by the end of the movie on her opinion on that. And yes, she overreacted when he cheated, or she reacted or had a big reaction and wanted to end the marriage because she felt that he had broken the sacred bond. And then they explored the reality that marriage is more than just about that bond. And, you know, do they need to talk about what's going on and all this kind of stuff? So I'm fine with that. I don't think it's hypocritical of her to cheat, period. I just don't. But what I think is frustrating is that we've set up a relationship where these two can talk about anything. They've worked through the hardest shit. They've already worked through it all. And maybe she feels really bad, and maybe she doesn't want to say anything because, oh God, have I been there? I've been married and I left a marriage. And the minute you open your mouth and speak into existence, I'm not happy, it is, you can't take it back. I was gonna say it's so different than just a normal relationship. It's really not. That's usually pretty much a turning point. But in a marriage, you better be careful, because if those walls come tumbling down, that piece of paper isn't just a piece of paper. There's legal fees. There's your whole life is this thing that you've done. And it's a big fucking deal. And, you know, for me, with my experience in a marriage, part of being happy was two people growing apart. Unhappy was two people growing apart, and me realizing I'm not sure if my partner could understand some of the things I want to explain or talk about. I don't think they just have that capacity. And so if I bring this up, it's not going to be, oh, a tough conversation from someone who totally gets what I'm saying. It's going to be a tough conversation, and then they don't even know what I'm saying. And so it's just it's a bunch of cans of worms, and it's a lot. And I definitely kept quiet about it for a long time, because there never seemed to be a good time with a lot of other things that go on in life. But once I did speak it into existence, it did snowball pretty quickly, and it ended relatively quickly after that, a few months or so, like kind of some last tries at things. But it was like I was the first one to speak it into existence. It was an ongoing conversation. It wasn't a very good conversation. It wasn't like well done conversation. It's just frustrating. But it wasn't like, oh, bye, I met someone. Well, I had met someone. But it was like, I guess I'm projecting my own experience onto it. And I guess a lot of us were just projecting that Miranda seemed unhappy before she met Che, right? She was kind of bored with the ice cream, and they hadn't had sex in a while. And I guess if Miranda never met Che, maybe her marriage with Steve would have kept going that way. But I honestly thought this was an exploration of a woman who wanted more, and not that he isn't enough, just wanted, let's use the word different instead of more. Just was like, I want something different, and I don't know what that is. And so at that point, I thought there'd be a conversation with Steve. Oh my God, sorry. It was like eyelash going into my eye. And so I never thought this was about Che. I actually thought it was about, I guess I didn't think it was about Miranda being queer or fluid or bisexual or into women or into non-binary people that were with a vagina. But I guess I just definitely knew that she wanted more. And I thought when she met Che and fell for Che, it confirmed a thing she was feeling, that like maybe she's not totally straight. I guess we just all read into that, because there's a point in this episode where Carrie says to Steve, this isn't about her wanting to sleep with women. This is about Che. And I really felt like I heard the entire country at once go, it is? Like, I literally thought it was about what I think is a more interesting and even forgiving story is, I don't think I'm straight anymore, or never was, or whatever. Like, I know someone, I don't know them personally, but who left her husband because she knew she was gay, but she had never slept with a woman. And now she's been out and about dating women. She was totally right about how she felt. You know, you don't have to like do something to know, right? Like, and so I literally thought that was the case with Miranda. Anyway, so episode 9, I think I'm like literally in suspense all week. And because I'm waiting for this scene. Now, I know any good writer on a TV show is going to lead the viewer down one path and then hook them in a different direction. I don't watch Law and Order or like murder shows, but I know part of the fun is like really thinking you've nailed it. And there's always another logical way it can go. And you're like, no way, they were the killer, or whatever. And I also know sometimes the fun part is like, no, you totally get it right because it's obvious and they give you what you want. I thought this was going to be a case of they're giving us what they very obviously set up. I don't necessarily think it's good writing that they didn't lead us down where we all thought we were going, because good writing would be taking us there, but still managing to affect us with the acting and the dialogue. You know, it's not like we're writing the scene in our head where we just kind of think we know the scenario. So nope, we don't, nothing bad happens. I'm just like, oh my God. Like, so we start the episode and this is what I miss. There used to be sweeping camera shots of the city, like coming in from like a airplane view, you know, set where they are. It literally looks like a sitcom, like Friends. Like it is filmed in New York and they are on location in some of those restaurants. My makeup's running, but like they just, first scene is just like Miranda and Che in a diner, and I just can't believe after what I saw last episode where she's in a cab saying, I'm going to meet Che, I'm living in a rom-com, and Carrie's like, I don't know who this is, that I'm supposed to accept that nothing went wrong in Cleveland and that they're just happy slappy in a diner in New York City. And Miranda's sitting there like, and Che's like, you look especially pretty. And Miranda says, and you look an appropriate, non-binary, not offensive compliment. It's like, does every single waking fucking moment have to be about this? Just say you look hot. That's a nice neutral term. You look good. You look sexy. Something. And then Che's like, you're a lot of fun. Of course you think that. The thing with comedians is it's really hard to date regular people. Not that we think we're so funny, but like in a way we do, or we just have differences as a humor where we see certain things coming and just not, it takes a lot to surprise us. And every once in a while we're just like, it's a lot. It's not like, whatever. So my point is that like, she's supposed to be this comedian, but they don't know like rule one of being a comedian is that not like every first thought your partner who's not a comedian says makes you laugh. And she's like, you are a lot of fun. And I'm like, that's because you're a bad comedian. That's why you think Miranda's a lot of fun. And she's like, even with your clothes on. I'm like, she's 55. Trust me, she's more fun with her clothes on. And that's not ageist. I'm 47. I see what starts to happen. So then they're in the diner. I'm like, why can't we ever see them have a deep conversation? Just so I know what's going on with anyone's heart. Why can't we see the conversation where Che says, so how'd it go with Steve? It was tough, you know, maybe tell us something we didn't see. The fight ended when he started crying and, you know, we actually ended up having sex one more time. I know that's crazy, but, you know, it's just something, anything. He threw chia seeds at me. I don't know, whatever. I had to tell my son Brady, and, you know, he's a pretty perceptive kid. He thought something was up, but we never know what happens to her family. Or like, Brady was at Che's rally. Like, Miranda didn't say to Brady, hey, I'm fucking that terrible comedian who you were the ally at the rally. Yeah, that's why I'm leaving your dad. Nice going, Mom. You need some lube? It's just so weird to me. And again, if I were the writer in the writer's room, again, you don't have a lot of control if like the boss wants to do certain things, but you do have the ability to, like, when you're brainstorming, be like, I just need to, I'm always this person in the writer's room, like, I just need to say, as someone who watches the show, if I'm watching and you guys jump from this, I'm in a rom-com, I'm going to Cleveland, to New York, and we don't see Cleveland, people are going to make fun of you. And like, I get it, like, you don't have to show Cleveland, but we've got to do something special, or even do a flashback to Cleveland. I don't know, but I mean, yeah, people might tune in, but they're going to be really pissed. Like, I seriously felt ripped off. So that's always me in any writer's room, but like, you don't always get listened to. So like, I don't know. But when I listen to the thing is, I don't have, the shows I've written on don't have podcasts. So you don't hear about everyone talking about stuff. And so I'm trying to sympathize with the writers, but I listen to them talk about the show every week, and none of them seem to be on the page I'm on, where they're like, we wanted to do this, but Michael Patrick King said that. they're like, isn't it great how Miranda and Che are just together now? And it's like, no, it's not. You've got to earn that or tell us anything. Like, what? How old is even Che? Like, Sada Ramirez is 46. And by the way, they're such a good actor that I am like always in hate mode with Che. Like, that's how good the acting is. But the problem is that I'm getting a sense from the writers, finally, I'm like, it's dawning on me, that they don't think Che is a problematic character. Che is like perfect to them. And I think it's so fucked up. They have this non-binary character that drinks too much, is a pothead, is kind of narcissistic, sleeps around, is also poly, is this, that. It's like, you're doing too much with this one character. And I don't know, if for a show that's like never had this kind of representation before, do you have to make that character the worst? They don't have to be the best, but in a weird way, they are making them the best because they're not pointing out their flaws. Like, it's like they can do no wrong and they're doing things that are at least question mark, where it's like, I'd like to know more about. Anyway, so then they're in the diner and these two fans come up to Che. And they're like, oh my God, you've gotten me through some really tough times. And I'm like, ironically, Che has gotten me into some really tough times. Yeah, no, my life was actually going pretty well until I met the character Che Diaz. So this is funny. Different people get different things out of stuff. And they're like, and they sidle into the booth and Miranda takes their photo and they're like, are you famous too? And she's like, oh no, I'm just the girlfriend. And Che kind of gives her a look like, and they're like, Che, you slept with my friend Melvin Ding Dong in blah blah. And Che's like, okay. And they're like, oh, and you also slept with my friend Lily blah blah. She's Australian, she lives in Minnesota. It's like, we get it. Che fucks a guy and a chick on the road. And Miranda's like, huh. And then Che's like, all right, thank you. It was kind of a funny moment. And they leave and I'm like, I get it. You're trying to show that Che sleeps around on the road. But what good is it if you're not going to pay it off with Miranda? I guess that leads into her feeling insecure and neurotic. But that's not what it's like to be with someone who's poly. These people have strict rules and there's a ton of fucking communication. Like, if you've ever watched any shows about it or you know anyone who is, trust me, there's more talking than not. And so that's what's making me crazy is Miranda feels like she can't say, hey, Che, am I the only person you're sleeping with? Or it's fine if not, but like, what is this? And then later on, Che goes, and to answer your like unasked, implied question, you're the only person I'm sleeping with right now. And Miranda's like, oh. And it's like, well, why don't you get a say in it? Why don't you get to go, well, what happens when you're sleeping with someone? Do you tell me? Or can I sleep with people? Or, you know, this is weird because I only want to sleep with you. Like, it's just like Che's in charge. Like, Charles in charge, dude. Che in charge. It is the new reboot. So, hang on. I just need a little something sweet. Sorry, everybody. I'm jonesing for a piece of ginger candy. Oh, that's got a kick to it. Oh, shit. Anyway. Whoo. Fuck. So, oh my God, my entire nail polish just fell off. What the fuck? I just got this done. It was a gel. It just fell off. Well, that sucks. Okay, anyway. So, at a point. Oh, the diner. Okay, so that's the whole scene. So then, we're at another lunch spot. Miranda, Charlotte, and Carrie, and they're talking about nothing. They're like talking about the food they should order. I'm like, is anyone gonna talk about the fact that Miranda left her husband? That's what these girls do. They talk about their lives. And then Charlotte starts talking about, you know, oh my God, I thought, you know how I haven't been in menopause yet? Well, I haven't had my period in 4 months. And then Miranda says, welcome to the sweating. And it's like, perimenopause is when you sweat. I mean, yes, you do sweat. Menopause means you haven't had your period for 1 year. That's when you can say, I went through menopause. If you're going through it, It means you're in peri. Everything is peri. And then after 1 year, when you haven't had your period, that's menopause. But peri lasts like 5 to 7 years. It's not a short thing. And you have intermittent hot flashes and hormonal changes and mood swings. It's literally like being a teenager again. It's like I'm in it now. I've been in it for 2 years and I'm 47. So it's like I've got like 3 to 5 more years of this, and it's tough, you know? And I don't go through it that much. I mean, it's not even tough. It's tough when it's happening, and it doesn't happen that often. It's like I get some symptoms like once every 3-4 months. Like I do acupuncture, I do all the things. I'm not suffering. I don't need to do anything about it. I'm just interesting. I notice when there's some hot flashes. I notice when there's some moods. Like obviously can't drink too much red wine. Anything like that affects it. But okay, so maybe Charlotte never had that, but she just, I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. I'm just like, a gay man wrote this, even though there's like women on the podcast. Maybe they're like hostages there or something. They're like, this was totally based on our menopause. I'm like, it doesn't make any sense though. Anyway, so like, welcome to the sweating. That doesn't happen after your period's done. The reason your period stops is because you don't have enough estrogen in your body left to have a normal reproductive cycle. So when your body is losing estrogen, it causes these hormonal changes that cause you to have hot flashes and all this. So there's really not, you might not get them badly if you're doing like all these kind of things for it. Like, I don't think I'm gonna have it too badly, but the sweating, if you've never had it, doesn't suddenly start, like, whatever. It made me crazy because like, you have 3 women, actresses sitting there that have completed their menopause. And the writers have too. 2 of them have. And I'm just like, does Michael Patrick King just like take every script and just do whatever he wants to it because he likes a line, even though it doesn't make sense for the female reproductive system? I don't know. So then Miranda's like, how can I get you all to go to Brooklyn and help me with her new friend, her professor, Nia Wallace's women's shelter? And I'm like, oh, fun, a women's shelter. That's what we know and love from Sex and the City. When Samantha, remember all those episodes where Samantha was like, I'm going to get us into all the hottest women's shelters. I'm just like, oh, God. Like, what? You're painting a women's shelter? What is this fucking extreme home makeover? Is this every episode of Queer Eye, you know, or like every season of Queer Eye has the like, we do something nice for the community episode. It's always the most boring one. I'm like, ugh. And then Carrie goes, I'll write a check. I'm not good at painting. And then Miranda's like, you can't be the white woman that writes a check. I'm like, yes, you can. Yeah, because you know what else homeless women's shelters need besides 13 people showing up to all paint? Money. They need money. They like money. That's how they got things going. Yeah, you can totally write a check. Remember during 2020 I think it was 2021 when like the electric grid went down in Texas and there were all these storms. All these people were sending things like Amazon wish list to all these different shelters. Like, it was money, it was stuff. I wasn't like, I'm not going to be a typical white person. I'm going to show up to Texas and start painting. It was like, I have an extra $100. I'll go to this shelter's Amazon wish list and throw them some stuff. Like, so Carrie's like, okay. And it's like, you better write a check as well because you're a millionaire and you just sold an apartment and you got a place in the Hamptons and your husband left another woman $1 million, which now is back to you. So you're going to write a check too. It's just like, so, it's just like, oh my God, every single fucking thing in this episode is like paying for the sins of the past. And it's like, were they even sins? The problem with television is that all groups have been underrepresented except straight white people, cis white people. The problem isn't that we have to revisit every show and make an overcorrect. It's that we need to have as many other voices so that there's, I mean, honestly, when I grew up watching TV, there was The Cosby Show, there was Amen, there was 227. It's just like 3 black sitcoms that weren't black sitcoms. They were just sitcoms on the air during the week, just like Cheers and Coach, or I don't know what the fucking show, Roseanne, you know. I don't know what happened, but it was a lot better in the 80s in a weird way, in some representative ways. Some, not all, obviously. But now it's like, yeah, there was totally a politically incorrect show back in the day, sometimes in a fun way and sometimes in a way that's like, ooh, that didn't hold up, but let it be. That's what it was. That was the time. And we don't have to correct because we know the hearts of the people in the show and they would have done better if they could have. And also, sometimes they wouldn't have. You know, I think to this day, Samantha would throw water at trans hookers in the street because to me, I'm just saying for me, even though they were saying tranny and all this shit and it like wasn't great. For me, it was always about, I don't care who is outside screaming outside my $1 million apartment, shut the fuck up. Just quiet down. I don't care if it's a trans hooker, a straight businessman, counting money loudly. All y'all are getting the same treatment. Like that's how I always saw it. And looking back on it, I go, oh, this doesn't hold up because of the way people look at things. But I don't think inherently it doesn't hold up. I thought it was supposed to be an edgy New York scene, if that makes sense. Like if you've ever lived in New York, everyone kind of mixes it up in a way. And like, trust me, you do have those moments. And the people aren't like, excuse me, I'm a trans hooker. Like it's not, whatever. It's too hard to explain. You get it or you don't. But I'm not saying we need that scene. And I'm not saying like, oh, let's worship that scene and why can't there be more of it? It's like, we don't need that scene. But we don't need an entire series to make up for scenes like that because like what it was doing wrong, on the flip side, it was also doing right, which was women in charge of their own sexuality, women not needing men, you know, blah, blah, blah. And women wanting men for sex and love, but like not needing, you know, and it's also like, well, I guess Carrie kind of did in a weird way, but the point is I don't know what they're doing right. I know what they're overcorrecting, but like what new thing they're bringing to the table, because there's other shows that do race and gender and sexuality better, you know, and you watch those shows for those things. So what is this show uniquely bringing to the table anymore? It could have been bringing to the table midlife problems, like having trouble getting hired in your 50s because young people think you don't know how to use the internet, even though your generation was on the forefront of it. But nobody's fucking working anymore, you know, except for Carrie. It's like, or just, I don't know, it's like, or having younger people, it happened more in the old series, you know, where Samantha faced ageism at 40. And I don't know what this show is doing right because it's not. Anyway, so they all go to the women's shelter. Fun. And you know that if this were back in the day, Samantha would have gone and written a check. And she'd be painting and there'd be like some hot painter there with just overalls on and no shirt. And she'd be like, and he'd be like, oh, you're doing it wrong. And she'd go, well, no man has ever told me that I don't know how to do long strokes. And then they would have started having sex in the broom closet. And she would have been like, overalls, let's get those over off. Or coveralls, let's get them to cover less. You know, and they would have been fucking in the closet. And Carrie would have walked in and she'd have been like, Carrie, sorry. She's like, that's all right. You know, and someone would be like, well, what's going on in there? And she'd be like, someone's penis is no longer unhoused. I don't know what that means, but there was absolutely no fun. And then we have the new characters and like, what's her face? Nia Wallace is talking to her husband and he's like, look at those kids learning to paint. And she's like, yeah, I don't want kids. Like they seem annoying. And he's like, I want one. And it's like, I don't know what's going to happen with them. And guess what? I don't care. I don't care about you. And if you want to have kids or not, IVF is boring. We've been here before. The planet's overpopulated. This isn't interesting. I don't care if you don't have kids. We're too old to be revisiting this. Do it somewhere else. Get another show called People Not Knowing If They Want Kids. But then that other new character, LTW, shows up and she and Charlotte came in like a stretch limo and they're like, seriously, we just ordered a van, but this is what showed up. It's sort of like when you order an Uber Comfort and then the black SUV comes. You can't help it. You weren't trying to be a rich bitch. That's just what showed up. So I get it. It's fine. It's cute. But then she comes out and she's wearing some crazy couture outfit that has like a pocket for like a small hairbrush and like there's makeup brushes coming out. It's like a utility outfit, but not for painting, but for like makeup. It's amazing. And I'm fascinated by it. And it was the best thing about the episode. But then Miranda sees them pull up and she sees LTW get out with the camera. And she's like saying to Carrie judgmentally, like, this isn't an Instagram moment. And it's like, what a judgy bitch. Like, literally, you're the judgiest. And so then LTW gets out and she's like, I thought I'd bring my camera to take pictures to put on the website to help the shelter. And Carrie says to Miranda, how bad do you feel? And Miranda's like, the worst. I mean, because you are the worst. And you've always been the worst. Oh my God forbid someone brings a camera to an event. What if it was just for Instagram? What if it was, bitch? You know what I mean? You know how you used Instagram to DM a terrible comedian and podcaster so you could have an affair on your husband? Well, oh, sorry, we don't all have your morals. Anyway, so that scene lasted entirely too long. And once again, everyone making a big deal about going to Brooklyn. It's like, oh my God, it's so boring. So Seema goes and she's like, Carrie, I'll drive you. You'll get lost on the subway. You won't get lost on the subway. You just take one line there the whole way, or you have to transfer once. And if she hasn't figured this out by now, so Seema's like, I'll drive you. If anyone ever offered to drive me from the Upper West Side to Brooklyn, I'd be like, no, I'm a subway girl all the way. Cars make me nauseous. I hate being in them too long. The traffic's terrible. Just get on the fucking subway. It is so much faster than driving. Anyway, Seema goes, and what's kind of fun is she's like the rich woman who's like, yeah, I'm not painting. They try to hand her paintbrushes. She's like, no, I'm going to write a check. And Carrie's like, well, Miranda said I'm white, so I can't. And then Seema jokingly says, it's really hard to be white these days. Like, she's kidding, but I think it's a funny line coming from the Indian woman. And then she's like, well, I'm a brown woman who's going to write a check. I just thought that was like kind of fun and delightful. And so she sits there smoking, which, I mean, she's in her 50s. Like, it is so wrong to like smoke in your 50s. It's so bad for you, but I'm enjoying every second of it. And she's just like that's what they're doing right. It's like, that's where they're being irreverent. And she's sitting there smoking. And this guy is like, excuse me, what is going on here? And he's got this terrible accent. I don't know what it is. French, German, who knows? And she's like, this is a women's shelter. And he's like, are you the boss? And she's like, no. And he's like, you look like a boss. And she's like, no, really, what are you? And he's like, I own the hottest nightclub in Brooklyn, right over here. And it's funny because she and Carrie had tried to get into this nightclub a few scenes earlier. Basically, it was Seema's birthday, but she didn't tell Carrie it was her birthday. She was just like, I feel like going dancing. And so she and Carrie were waiting in line at a club, and they couldn't get in because, again, Samantha would have been able to get you in. Anyway, so they're like waiting in line, and then Seema says something like, it's my birthday. And Carrie's like, what? And she's like, I just wanted to go dancing. And Carrie's like, I'll take care of it. So she goes up to the bouncer, and the bouncer gives him a whole story. It's my friend's birthday, and she just wants to go dancing. And he's like, yeah, well, no, we're at capacity. And then Seema tries to offer him cash, and he's like, that's insulting. And so they walk away, and they didn't get into the club. And Seema goes, was I just canceled by a doorman? And I'm like, no, because that's not what canceled means. That you can just see Michael Patrick King there, like, writing the scripts, like, how many buzzwords can I get in? Let's get in canceled. King. It's not using a typewriter, but anyway. And I'm just like, that's not what canceled means. Canceled is not a thing that, like, happens. It's like you're in the public eye. You get canceled. And Carrie's like, you just did. And I'm like, you didn't. That's not even what, like, hand a young guy cash to try to get in. Like, the joke would be when you're walking away, I should have Venmo'd him. And Carrie's like, Ven what'd? Like, because she doesn't know what that is. Or just something, you know? Or just Seema going, did I offer too much or too little? I don't get what the insult was. And Carrie's like, I don't get anything. Something. But not, was I just canceled by a doorman? It's not even a good joke. Even if she was canceled, like, that's not a joke. It's just a question and an answer. And that's what Michael Patrick King has always thought jokes were. Puns or answers and questions said with a side of sass. So anyway, so Seema's sitting outside of the women's shelter smoking. Thank God somebody is thinking about how to have some fun. And then the guy is like, well, you're in the way of my hottest nightclub in Brooklyn. And she's like, I'll be the judge of that or something. But basically, I was like, I know this actor. I've heard this terrible accent before, and I can't tell if it's a bad actor doing a fake accent or an actor with an accent who's also a bad actor. And I was like, where have I heard this before? Where have I heard this before? And I started looking up who that guy was. And then I saw someone say on a message board somewhere, the guy that Seema's obviously going to start dating that runs the nightclub in Brooklyn. And she wouldn't have met him unless she went to this women's shelter thing. Oh my God, it's all falling into place. He played the guy that worked at Prada back when Carrie was dating Jack Berger. And she's like, I'm bringing my boyfriend to Prada. And he's like, oh, everybody needs a little Prada, Jack Berger. And then Charlotte was single because she just said something mean to Harry. And Carrie brought Prada guy to Smith Jarrett's play in Brooklyn that Samantha took them all to. And Charlotte sat next to Prada guy, but there was no thing. Anyway, that's him. He's back in his 50s. But it's not like he's like, I used to work at Prada. I think he's supposed to be a whole new character. I think it would be fun if they weren't like, oh no, we just hired the same actor twice for 2 different roles in 2 different decades. That's also fine. But it would be fun if like later we find out, like if Carrie's like, wait, do I know you? And he's like, I don't think so. She's like, did you used to work at Prada? And he's like, oh my God, you know. They're not gonna do that. So, okay, so at the fucking women's shelter, Steve comes with Brady. And he's like standing right near Miranda, but they don't talk. And he decides to come because, I don't know, he's nice and maybe it's something good for his kid to do. Get him out of the house because he's always having sex with his girlfriend. Who knows? So Steve picks Carrie as his painting partner. And so they're painting. And he's like, so did you know about Miranda and this Che? And the way he says it is like how we're all saying it, like, this Che. And I know, though, the writers have this contempt for Steve right now. I don't know what the fuck it is, but they're trying to make him look like some old fuddy-duddy who doesn't know, like, they, them, blah, blah. And it's like, he's just bitter because his wife is leaving him. It's not a non-binary phobic thing. So Carrie's like, no, I didn't know anything. Ooh. And then she steps in some paint and runs away. I'm like, you have billions of dollars. You don't have to run away because you step in paint. You're in your 50s. Why were you wearing those fucking giant heels to begin with? It's not cute anymore. You're painting. Your best friend's ex-husband, who is also a friend of yours, is hurting. And when you and Aiden broke up and you wanted to get back together, you talked Steve's ear off on the stoop while he was just trying to bounce a basketball. And you're like, well, should I get back together with Aiden? Or, you know, and you can't even listen to him for 2 seconds when it's your fault. You invited Che to Big's funeral for no reason. There was like 5 people invited. It was a small affair. And you brought your dumb podcast partner who smoked pot like right there in front of everyone out of a bowl. Anyway, Steve's like, and so Carrie runs away. Now Carrie has been wearing her wedding ring and Big's wedding ring. She found Big's wedding ring and she put it on, and then she wrapped a Band-Aid around it so it would fit her finger. So she's been wearing her wedding ring and his. So she runs to the bathroom and she's cleaning her shoe, you know, totally blows off Steve, who's just trying to get some information about what the fuck's going on with his wife. And her rings fall down the drain. She's like, oh no. It's like so classic Carrie and her fucking drama. It's like when she lost Aiden's dog. She's like, Pete! Everything is always just, and you know, or when she sees the squirrel when they're, you know, in the woods. Ah! So Steve comes, she's like, Steve! And he comes running in. He's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, look, whose hearing suddenly got better. He heard Carrie from another room. So I'm like, either he got a new hearing aid or maybe he just has something where he can't hear Miranda. Red flag. So anyway, he comes in, he's like, I'll get it. So now he's suddenly a plumber, even though, you know, because he's the perfect man. He's so lovely. So he goes in there and he gets, and she's like, is it really something you can fix? He's like, yeah, you just gotta get it out of the thing. And he takes it out and the rings fall out. And she's like, and he's like, yeah, I get it. So basically they're setting up this dovetail of she's wearing the rings and Steve still has his wedding ring on. You know, Carrie's living in the past. And Steve says, I'm never taking this off. And Carrie's like, never? And he's like, till death do us part. which is a weird thing to say. Every minute, Carrie's like, don't say that, my husband died. And it's like normal things that people would say in conversation. But this is the one time where it's like, it's not death to you part unless you're still married. It's not death do you part, like, oh, and then she left me for someone else and I wear the ring until I die. Like, she's not like, no, Steve, no. And so she doesn't say, my husband died. She's just like, so basically he's not moving on, which I think the writers think makes him seem sweet, but it makes him seem weak, and it's like sad because the writers don't get it. I was listening to their podcast and they're like, I don't know what people want. Miranda's changing. It's like, none of us want him to be with her. She's terrible. We just want him to be treated well during it, and then maybe he can be okay with it. Or if he doesn't find someone new, he's happy or something. Or maybe we just see Miranda have a comeuppance, which I know it doesn't solve Steve's life, but it makes us feel better. Like, that's what we're saying. We're not saying they have to be together. And the writers keep being like, we're getting a lot of pushback on how we're treating Steve, but people just don't understand that sometimes women in midlife, we're like, no, we get that part. We're not saying the solve to his life is to be with her. We don't want that. So anyway, so Carrie sees him unable to move on with the ring, and later on it makes her realize I should move on. But he says something like, so did Miranda ever say anything to him about wanting to sleep with women? And Carrie's like, no. And I think this is the worst thing you can say to someone. She's like, it's not about her wanting to sleep with women. It's about her wanting to be with Che. And it's just like, oh my God. If my partner left me to be with a non-binary person of the same gender, I would take some solace in being like, maybe they wanted to be with someone without a penis, even though they're not identifying totally as a woman. But the cold hard facts is there's no dick down there. I would take solace in that. And Carrie's like, no, not even about that. Just met a person they like better than you. And after 3 weeks, you're nothing, buddy. I mean, it was awful. So, and Steve's just like, oh, so. And then all these people I'm reading on message boards are saying, Steve and Carrie would be a good couple. I'm like, stop wishing the worst things for Steve. They would not be a good couple. So Carrie basically ends up, she's got a second date with the teacher. And this scene was cool. She shows up to tell him she can't have dinner because she's just having a moment. Like, she put the rings back on and she's just not ready to move on from Big. And he's like, she's like, he comes over and he's like, I can tell something's wrong. And she's like, I can't do dinner. And he's like, I get it. And she's like, I just wanted to come and tell you that it wasn't personal. I put my rings back on. And he's like, I get it. I still have a voicemail from my dead wife. And Carrie's like, yeah, I'm wearing a Band-Aid on my ring. And he's like, maybe dating is like a Band-Aid over something where, what we tried it and because we don't want to hurt, but it's not time yet or something. And Carrie's like, yeah. And then she leaves and he's like, best rejection ever. And he's like, strike two. And then later on, after she's like had her journey in this episode, she puts the Big and her ring back in the box and she picks up the phone and she texts the teacher and says, ready for strike three. So like, they're probably going to go out again. But before all that, so now we've got Miranda and Che. So now Miranda, like after that whole diner scene or whatever, there's like another scene where Miranda is looking at her phone at the women's shelter thing outside. And she's like, I'm not going to text them back. And Carrie's like, oh, are you doing the rules now? Like pretending you're washing your hair. And Miranda's like, no, I just don't want to be too available. I'm trying to, dial it down. And I guess they're trying to show that Miranda is playing by the same old heteronormative rules. But again, like that is how it is when you date anyone of any gender, even same gender to same gender or non-binary to straight. Like if there's a dominant person who's like needing the space, the one who's more available, like will always try to backtrack. It's not like, oh my God, Miranda just can't get this like man-woman shit out of her head. It's like, this happens in all things. So anyway, but there's a scene where Che's at home writing. I can't believe that act involves any kind of pre-thought. And so Miranda shows up with cookies. And it's like, wait a minute, you just left your husband because you're like, all we do is eat ice cream together. But you're showing up at someone's house with cookies. Bitch, you're the problem. You're the one trying to turn every relationship into a dessert bar. So she shows up with cookies and she's like, oh my God, I wish you texted. And Miranda's like, why? Is someone here? And she's like, yeah, I'm here. I'm writing. And Miranda's like, oh, okay. And she's like, and Miranda's like, what am I, Meg Ryan? And she keeps like referencing this rom-com thing. And it's like, no, Michael Patrick King. The thing we wanted you to carry over is not this like joke about she's in a rom-com, she's Meg Ryan. We wanted you to carry over what we saw happen last episode, which is her going to Cleveland. We wanted to see Cleveland. We don't need 5 more Meg Ryan jokes. And so Miranda's like, I'm just so embarrassed. And she's like, hey, calm down. And I'm thinking the same thing, like she's in hysterics. There's a lot of hysterical women in this episode. We haven't even gotten to Charlotte's daughter, Lily, who's literally shrieking and screaming about putting in a tampon. Literally 3 women in this episode, including Carrie, are literally in hysterics. Like in the olden days when women would go to the doctor and doctors would vibrate them with a vibrator and bring them to orgasm and calm them down. Like literally that is the level of hysteria we're talking about. Okay, so Che's like, listen, you're not my girlfriend and we're not dating. And Miranda's like, no, what are we doing? And Che's like, we're getting to know each other. And it's like, you gaslighting fuck. You told her you were in love with her. So for you, it goes, I'm in love with you. We're just getting to know each other. Like, dude, also, okay. I get what Che is saying. It's not about labels, but why can't Miranda call herself your girlfriend? Lover, what word do you want to use? Because you're obviously have a different relationship than, say, you and Carrie. Like, when people say Carrie's boss Che, you don't go, I'm not into labels. And by the way, I'm very into labels. Labels make us feel safe and secure. And one of the most beautiful things about the world getting more woke, and I mean that in a good way, is now we have labels like fluid, non-binary, pan, poly, trans, queer, gay, things that have always existed, but we didn't put into words, at least not words that weren't slurs and offensive. But now you can own something and say, please call me they, them. I am a non-binary person. I am a trans woman. I am this, I am that. And that's freedom because you get to live your truth, as Che is always talking about. So the fact that Che, who has this insistence that everybody live by a certain moral code that they live by, you're not in an open marriage, blah, blah, call me they, them. Well, then Miranda gets a say in this relationship too. And again, like, labels are not a bad thing necessarily, you know? And so it's like, for me, I need labels to let me know what I'm getting myself into. I made that with my label maker, just for the joke. So I don't know why Miranda can't say, hey, listen, fuck, I like labels too. So you're they, them, I'm the girlfriend. I need that security. And then, you know, that's when Che goes, you're the only one I'm sleeping with right now. I just don't like it. There's something creepy about it. And they keep doing this thing on the show where it's like everything someone younger says or everything someone non-binary says is like correct about everything. And it's like not always. Like you might be correct in like educating someone about like, you know, the way Charlotte's daughters were like, those dolls are culturally inappropriate. That is a truth. But just because a character is like, this is what I want in this relationship, they're not correct just because they're more, I don't know, kind of modernized than Miranda. And also, just read the book, The Tragedy of Heterosexuality. That's what Che is talking about, heteronormative tropes. But no one on the show is fucking smart enough to know that word. Ah! Anyway, so then there's this whole subplot. Charlotte's daughter, Lily, screams. I'm literally like, oh, she's getting murdered. Like a murderer climbed in the window. This is getting exciting. And she's like, I got my period. It wasn't her first period. It was just that she did her period tracker, which lets her know that the next time she gets her period, it's going to be during her friend's pool party in the Hamptons. And she's like, I don't wear tampons. And so as you know or may not know, you can't wear a pad and a bathing suit. That's not a thing. You gotta wear a tampon or a diva cup. I just can't. Okay, so this whole episode is about Lily doesn't use tampons, but there's no bigger discussion about like, does she wear Thinx underwear, which is like this absorbent underwear that you can wear. You don't even have to wear a pad. They have Diva cups. It's like a cup that you put up your vagina. There's like, and I do, like, a lot of people don't like to use tampons because they have plastic applicators and that's bad for the environment. Or some tampons, like I have here, like Tampax, are, you know, they have the plastic applicator is bad for the environment, but like sometimes the tampon itself has like bleach in it. So sometimes they have these like all natural tampons that you can buy. And then there's OB, which is, it doesn't have an applicator. You just shove it in with your finger. There's so many different types of tampons and things you can wear. And so I thought this show might actually explore all the different ways you can collect your period blood, you know? And so Charlotte's like, well, why don't you just learn how to put in a tampon? And then it's like, Lily's like, no, I'd rather die than wear a tampon. It's like, I literally thought this episode was setting her up to have some kind of like massive anxiety disorder, because I'll tell you my first tampon story. I did get my period when I was like 14. I got it once, and then it didn't come back for a year because I was like massively underweight, thin dancer person, not trying to be underweight, was just always underweight my whole life until 5 years ago. And so it came back when I was like 15, and I just wore a pad, honestly, because no one in my house wore tampons. My mom had been had stopped getting her period for like years. My sisters were older. They were out of the house. And it all was mixed up in like, we just don't talk about our bodies, you know, or we didn't. And under the sink, I saw these Stay Free pads, and that was the brand. And it was this woman in like a long white dress on the beach. And that was back in the day, before they thought to put sticky adhesives on the back of a maxi pad that you would stick into your underwear. I don't even know how this worked. Women wore belts like around their waist that would hold the pad in. I mean, obviously under their clothes. And there were maxi pads under the sink that were like belted maxi pads, but there was no belt. And I remember looking through them when I was 12, like, what is this? And how is this going to work when I get my period? There's no internet. For some reason, I didn't feel comfortable asking my mom. And I got my period at school, and I didn't know it was my period because it wasn't red. It was black. It just looks like a bunch of black goo because it's stagnant blood that's been in there forever, you know? And sometimes your period is like red and like very watery and red. It looks like kind of more watery blood. And a lot of times it's stagnant blood. And so it was stagnant, and I was like, I think this is my period, but I think something's drastically wrong because no one tells you that is in all different kinds of colors. And I was just like so scared and so freaked out. And then I went home and told my mom, and she's like, no, that's your period. And so there was a pad that had sticky stuff on it, and I was like, good to go. And yeah, it's like very annoying, and like, I don't think people could tell I had a pad on because, again, I was like such a string bean that it was just like all my clothes hung off me anyway. But I think it felt safe and secure to wear a pad because you know it's going to absorb all that blood. But like with a tampon, you're kind of like, oh, I don't know. Is this going to really hold all the blood that I have? So it's just like, forget it. I won't even need to bother. I really don't remember what the resistance was, but it wasn't like, I'd rather die. It was more just like, I don't know how, and I don't know who to ask. And my mom never wore them, and I don't know. And so I remember being at my friend's house, and she had a pool. And I think I had just probably lied to my friends and said, yeah, I wear tampons. And I went to the bathroom at my friend Terry's, and I was like, oh no, I have my period. It had like come back. I hadn't had it in like a year. And she was like, Jen, where are you? She like came upstairs knocking, and I'm like, oh, I have my period. And she's like, oh, there's tampons under the sink. And I was like, fuck, I don't know how to use a fucking tampon. And so I just was like reading the instructions, and I figured it out. So this is a tampon. See this? You want to click it. So it's like this. So you put it up your vaju, and then you push this, and this goes into your vagina. And this you throw out. Bad for the environment. But now this is in your vagina, and the string hangs out. And this fills with blood, and it opens up. Here, I'll put it in water. It expands in your vagina, and you don't feel it at all. And then you pull it out, and you're you're bloody, like it's wet. So when you pull it out, it just slips right out. It's not, the only time it hurts coming out is if you're like not bleeding and you're just kind of pulling a dry thing out, but it doesn't hurt. It feels like that. It's not painful. So that's your lesson, everybody. You pull it out. It's really one of the greatest inventions for me. I find tampons very easy. But they could have done all this fun stuff. Like they could have had like tampons flying around and like, Charlotte filling it up and go, look, this is what's inside there, and like putting it in a glass of wine or something. But instead, Lily's like freaking out and Charlotte's like, okay, this is how we do it. And then Charlotte's like, and you kind of angle it in. And I'm like, angle it in? I never had to angle it. I'm like, are some people's things tilted? I've heard that before, but mine isn't. And then, and then they're like looking at YouTube videos. I'm like, it's really not that hard. Like all she has to do, she could just put one in herself. She's like, do you want me to show you? And Lily's like, ew, no. I'd be like, I don't give a shit what you say. I'm going to show you. You don't have to like totally look at my vag, but I'll just show you. Like, here, I'll look on you. And like, it was just, she was in hysterics. And so then like when they're at the women's shelter, Lily goes into the porta potty and she's like, ah! And literally like shrieking, like I'm in a movie about the Manson murders and I'm getting murdered. And she's like, ah! And then Charlotte comes, outside the porta potty and she's like, I have to take my tampon out and it feels like I'm pulling my insides out. I'm like, that's not what it feels like. Is this Michael Patrick King writing a script who knows nothing about women's bodies? Did he just take one of the scripts that one of the women wrote and just like rewrote? Like it doesn't feel like anything. I talked to every woman I know. We were all texting each other. People were calling me. Everyone was losing their mind. Like, have we never talked about this before? Does yours feel like your inside? Everyone's like, no. I mean, she must have like something wrong with the inside of her vagina. Like she's got hemorrhoids or something. I'm like, what? Or she's got a massive anxiety disorder. It was so, and I get it. I'm sure someone in the writer's room was like, this is what happened with my teenager, but who cares? This is so boring. We got that going on. And then someone inside painting going, I don't know if I want kids. And I'm like, I know I don't want any of this. I just want some fun. Just some fun. Give me some fun. God damn it. While democracy burns. Ugh. The only fun part was Anthony brought a date over to their house. And Charlotte said to Harry, make sure to put the challah in the oven, the challah bread. And then Anthony's date goes, oh, is this a Jewish household? And Anthony's like, and Harry goes, yep. And he goes, well, you guys know the Holocaust was a hoax, right? And Anthony goes, get out! And just like broke up with him right there. And I'm like, that's fun. And weirdly, the episode did air on Holocaust Remembrance Day, which I'm sure they didn't do on purpose, but great. That's how Sex and the City does a tribute. Very politically incorrect, and that's what we love the show for. And then lastly, Carrie's neighbor comes up. She's the jewelry designer, the new young woman, and she's like, would you mind wearing this ring and putting it on your Instagram? And Carrie's like, oh, well, I'm not an influencer. I'm just a writer. And she's like, I'm obsessed with your podcast. I'm like, you're not obsessed with your podcast. You're a beautiful, young, cool, trendy jewelry designer. You don't listen to that piece of shit. Stop it. And why isn't Carrie like, well, besides the podcast, I'm like a huge writer, but I'm just like, make her a necklace that says, my husband died. She can replace it instead of her Carrie necklace because that way she doesn't have to keep saying it in every fucking episode. So that's my recap of And Just Like That episode 9. Next week is the finale, and I saw a trailer. And it starts with Charlotte going, the trans rabbi is in. And Charlotte says, for Rock's bar mitzvah. And Charlotte goes, it's a they mitzvah. And I literally, I'm now transphobic. I'm going to tell all my friends that are trans, like, I can't support you anymore because this show is so stupid. I'm just totally kidding. But it is, why don't you call it a rock mitzvah? That's a better pun. I can't, you guys, I can't. I'm going to take this tampon and I'm going to put it over my eyes when I watch next week. I hope you stay with me. Stay through February. We'll have a lot of fun with the last episode. And more fun to come. All right, everybody. I don't know what. Don't smoke.